The fluorescent lights of the cruise terminal clinic hummed with a sickly, sterile vibration that matched the dread pooling in Marin Ella's stomach. She stared at the glowing screen of her phone, the voicemail from the rehab ward playing on a loop, her brother's slurred, desperate voice cutting through the static like a jagged knife. Miles away, in the suffocating heat of the luxury warehouse district, Declan Rourke stood surrounded by a circle of managers in crisp suits, their shouts echoing off the concrete walls. Accusations of a missing shipment hung in the air, heavy and toxic, while Declan remained silent, his thumb rubbing the worn beads of the rosary in his pocket. The contrast was suffocating. Marin fighting for a life, Declan fighting for a shred of dignity against a machine designed to crush them both. They were two souls drowning in the same dark ocean, unaware that the currents pulling them under were controlled by the same hand. Love was the only buoy they had, but in a world ruled by power and currency, love was often the first thing to sink. Watch closely, because the fall from grace is never just about the impact, it is about the shattering. The plastic chair in the waiting room was hard against Marin's back, a constant reminder of the discomfort that had become her life. The smell of antiseptic and stale coffee permeated the air, mixing with the metallic tang of fear that never truly left. Her brother, Julian, lay behind the double doors, his heart rate erratic, the monitors beeping in a rhythm that felt too fast. The doctor had spoken of a window closing, of the need for a private specialist that their insurance would never cover. Marin's phone buzzed again in her hand, a cruel vibration against her palm, signaling another demand for payment she couldn't meet. She felt the walls closing in, the weight of 1,000 unpaid bills pressing down on her chest like a physical force. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, knowing that crying was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Declan sat on the edge of his cot in the break room, the noise of the forklifts drifting in from the floor below. He held the rosary beads between his thumb and forefinger, the smooth wood worn down by years of anxious rubbing. He didn't know Marin was fighting for her brother's life, but he felt a strange, heavy pull in his chest. His shift was over, but the lingering tension of the day kept him rooted to the spot, staring at the gray locker. He thought about the numbers he'd seen on the manifest earlier, the discrepancies that didn't make sense to anyone else. A quiet brilliance simmered behind his tired eyes, a pattern recognition that he usually kept hidden to avoid standing out. He sighed, the sound heavy in the empty room, and wondered how much longer he could survive the grind. Marin stepped out of the hospital room, her breath hitching as she looked at the dark sky through the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, a world of luxury and ease that felt entirely separate from her current reality. She needed a miracle, a sudden windfall, or perhaps a devil willing to make a deal for her soul. The thought scared her, but the fear of losing Julian was a primal force that overrode all logic. She clutched her coat tighter around her body, shivering not from the cold, but from the isolation of her burden. There was no one to call, no safety net left to catch her if she fell. She was truly, terrifyingly alone in her fight against the inevitable. Declan finally stood up and shoved the rosary into his pocket, grabbing his worn canvas jacket. He walked out of the warehouse, the cool night air hitting his face as he headed toward the bus stop. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows on the pavement, mimicking the confusion in his mind. He replayed the manager's accusation about the missing shipment, the lies woven so effortlessly into the narrative. They needed a scapegoat, and he was the perfect candidate, poor, quiet, and seemingly unintelligent. But Declan knew the truth was hidden in the logistics, buried under layers of corporate deceit. He adjusted his collar, preparing himself for the long, cold ride back to his small apartment. Marin leaned against the brick wall of the hospital, dialing a number she hoped she wouldn't regret. It was a long shot, a connection to a charity event she had worked months ago as a temporary medic. The line rang, the silence stretching out like a tightrope ready to snap. She didn't want to beg, but desperation had a way of stripping away pride until only raw need remained. If she didn't find the money tonight, Julian would be transferred to a state facility with no hope. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, as the call connected to a bored-sounding receptionist. The conversation was brief, but it planted a seed that would soon grow into a terrible bargain. Declan watched the city blur past the bus window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. He thought about Marin, the kind woman from the terminal who sometimes shared her coffee with him. He didn't know her struggle, but he recognized the look of someone carrying a heavy load. Their interactions were brief, fleeting moments of warmth in a cold, industrial world. He wondered if she was okay, if she was fighting a battle he couldn't see. The bus hit a pothole, jarring him from his thoughts and bringing him back to his own reality. He closed his eyes, the image of the flawed manifest burning behind his eyelids. Marin hung up the phone, a sliver of hope warring with the dread in her gut. They had forwarded her information to the head of the Whitlock Foundation. It was a chance, however small, to get the funding for Julian's treatment. She walked back toward the ICU, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The price of this help was unknown, a terrifying variable in her equation of survival. She would pay anything, do anything, to keep her brother breathing. Little did she know, the price demanded would be far higher than money. And as she pushed open the door to his room, the clock began ticking down on her innocence. The fluorescent lights of the warehouse hummed with an aggressive energy that matched the shouting match in the center aisle. Declan stood still, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the scene unfold with practiced stoicism. The shift manager, a man named Miller whose face was perpetually red, was waving a clipboard like a weapon. 3 crates of high-end jewelry, gone, Miller spat, his finger pointing accusingly at Declan's chest. You were the only one on the dock last night, Rourke, don't try to deny it. The other workers watched from a distance, their eyes averted, fearful of being drawn into the crossfire. Declan said nothing, his gaze drifting to the ceiling where a security camera blinked uselessly. He knew the camera had been disabled, a fact he had noticed but chosen not to report yet. It wasn't theft, it was a systematic diversion, a hole in the inventory system big enough to drive a truck through. Declan's mind raced, calculating the weights, the timestamps, and the false logs entered into the system. He could prove it wasn't him, but doing so would require revealing the extent of his knowledge. And revealing his intelligence would make him a target, a loose end that needed tying up. So he remained silent, absorbing the verbal abuse like a sponge. He felt the rosary in his pocket, a silent reminder to have patience, to wait for the right moment. The cops are already on their way, Miller sneered, enjoying the power trip too much. Corporate wants to make an example of whoever is bleeding this company dry. Declan finally looked the man in the eye, his expression calm but his gaze piercing. Check the manifest again, Declan said quietly, his voice steady over the noise of the warehouse. The weights don't match the contents. It was never jewelry in those crates. Miller paused, confusion flickering across his face for a split second before anger took over. Don't you dare try to outsmart me, you forklift monkey. He shoved Declan backward, stumbling slightly against the pallet of boxed goods. The shove was unnecessary, a display of dominance that signaled the end of rational discourse. Declan righted himself, his jaw tightening, the muscles in his neck twitching with suppressed tension. He knew this wasn't about the crates, this was about clearing the deck for something bigger. Someone higher up needed a fall guy to cover a trail that led far away from this loading dock. He glanced toward the offices on the mezzanine level, where the blinds were drawn tight. They were watching, assessing his reaction, determining if he would break or bend. Declan made a show of looking down at his boots, feigning submission. It was a performance, a role he played to survive until he could change the script. You're suspended pending investigation, Miller yelled, spittle flying from his lips. Clear out your locker and get off my property before I have you dragged out. The workers scattered, returning to their tasks, eager to avoid the fallout of Declan's firing. He walked slowly to the break room, his heart pounding a rhythm of defiance against his ribs. He wasn't scared of the police, he was scared of losing access to the data he needed. If he was locked out of the system, he wouldn't be able to trace the missing goods. He needed to get to the terminal, to find Marin, to warn her that something was wrong. He didn't know why she came to mind, but she was the only person he trusted. Marin was at the terminal clinic, counting pills with shaking hands, when she saw the news alert on her tablet. A headline about a major theft scandal rocking the luxury retail brand where Declan worked. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the blurry photo of a worker being escorted out. It was Declan, looking downcast, surrounded by security guards. She felt a sudden, sharp pang of sympathy, knowing how hard he worked for so little. If he was involved, it didn't fit the character of the man who shared his lunch with strays. She grabbed her phone, wanting to reach out, but stopped herself. What could she possibly offer him besides empty words when her own life was falling apart? Declan packed his meager belongings into his canvas bag, his movements deliberate and slow. He slipped a small, black notebook into his back pocket, the most valuable item he owned. It contained his personal logs, the decoded discrepancies he had tracked over the last 6 months. This was his insurance policy, the proof that the theft was an inside job at the executive level. He zipped the bag shut and walked out of the break room, his head held high. Passing Miller, he didn't speak, but the look in his eyes promised a reckoning. The warehouse floor felt different now, not a workplace, but a crime scene he was trespassing in. He stepped out into the bright morning sun, the automatic doors closing behind him with a final hiss. He was unemployed, disgraced, and vulnerable, exactly where they wanted him. But as he walked toward the bus stop, he pulled the notebook out and thumbed the pages. He wasn't defeated, he was just getting started. The patterns were there, the names were there, and now he had the time to connect them. He thought of Maren again, hoping she was faring better than he was. Little did he know, their paths were about to collide in a way that would shatter both their worlds. The game had changed, and the players were taking their positions on the board. The waiting room of the Whitlock Foundation smelled of lilies and expensive leather, a stark contrast to the hospital. Maren sat on a velvet chair, her hands clenched in her lap, waiting for the woman who held her brother's fate. The rehab center had given Julian 24 hours to pay or face discharge onto the street. Desperation had driven her here, to the pinnacle of the city's philanthropic elite. The double doors opened, and Serena Whitlock swept in, radiant in a tailored suit that screamed power. She didn't offer a hand to shake, instead gliding behind a massive mahogany desk and sitting like a queen. "Ms. Ellis, I understand you have a financial problem that requires immediate attention," Serena purred. Maren nodded, her voice catching as she explained Julian's condition and the imminent eviction. She laid out the medical bills, the notices, the stark reality of poverty on the polished wood. Serena barely glanced at the papers, her eyes fixed on Maren's face with a predatory interest. "It is tragic," Serena said, her voice dripping with simulated sympathy. "We help so many." She tapped a manicured nail on the desk, a rhythmic sound that made Maren flinch. "The foundation can cover the rehab. We can even ensure he gets the best specialists." Maren's heart leapt, a surge of relief flooding her veins so strong it made her dizzy. "Thank you," she whispered, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. "I'll pay you back, I swear." Serena smiled, a cold, calculated expression that didn't reach her eyes. "We don't expect repayment in money, Ms. Ellis. That would be crass." She opened a drawer and pulled out a file, sliding it across the desk toward Maren. "Your brother is an addict, correct? Recovery is a long, uncertain road." Maren froze, the blood draining from her face. "Yes, but he's doing better." "Addicts relapse," Serena stated flatly. "And when they do, they need more than just doctors." The file contained photos of Julian, clearly high, taken recently inside the facility. Maren gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "How did you get these?" "I own the facility, Ms. Ellis. Or rather, the holding company that owns it does." Serena leaned back, her gaze locking onto Maren's. "His continued care is entirely up to me." The leverage was established, a heavy chain wrapped around Maren's throat. Serena wasn't offering charity, she was buying a servant, a mole, a weapon. "What do you want?" Maren asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. She knew there was no choice, not really. Julian's life was the bargaining chip. Whatever Serena wanted, Marin would have to do it. "We have a small issue at the cruise terminal clinic," Serena began smoothly. "Inventory discrepancies regarding medical supplies that are being shipped overseas." Marin's brow furrowed. "I'm just a receptionist. I don't handle inventory." "No, but you have access to the logs and the waste disposal records." Serena stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against it right in front of Marin. "I need you to ensure certain numbers match when the auditors arrive next week." It was vague, but the implication was clear: falsify records, hide the trail. "If you do this, Julian stays. If you refuse, he is on the street tonight." Marin looked at the photos of her brother, his face gaunt and desperate. She thought of Declan, accused of theft, and wondered if this was the same spiderweb. But she couldn't think about that right now. She could only think about saving Julian. "I'll do it," Marin whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Serena's smile widened, satisfied with the total surrender she had engineered. "Excellent. I knew you were a practical girl, Marin." She reached out and patted Marin's cheek, a gesture that felt more like a slap. "Welcome to the family, Ms. Ellis. Don't disappoint me." Marin walked out of the office, her legs feeling like lead weights. She had sold her integrity for her brother's life, a transaction that felt dirty yet necessary. The sun outside was blinding, reflecting off the glass skyscrapers that housed people like Serena. She felt small, insignificant, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. "Keep your eyes open. They are watching you too." Marin shivered, looking around the busy street, wondering who had sent it. Was it a warning? Or was it just another layer of the trap closing in around her? Declan sat in a coffee shop near the warehouse, his notebook open on the table. He had traced the missing shipments to a holding company, but the trail went cold at the port. He needed someone on the inside, someone who wouldn't be flagged by security. He thought about Marin, working at the terminal, but dismissed the thought immediately. She was kind, gentle, not someone who could handle the grit of corporate espionage. He sipped his black coffee, his eyes scanning the financial data he had memorized. The pattern was clear now: luxury goods were being labeled as medical supplies to avoid taxes. It was brilliant and ruthless, exactly the kind of scheme a predator like Serena would run. He closed the notebook, his jaw set. He had to find a way in. Marin boarded the bus back to the terminal, her heart heavy with her secret. She looked out the window and saw a man in a dark jacket walking down the street. It was Declan, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, carrying a canvas bag. She almost knocked on the window to call out to him, but stopped. If she was going to become a criminal for Serena, she couldn't drag Declan down with her. He was already in trouble, she couldn't add to his burden. She watched him disappear into the crowd, feeling a profound sense of loss. The distance between them wasn't just physical anymore, it was a chasm of guilt and survival. And as the bus pulled away, she realized she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. The charity gala was in full swing, a kaleidoscope of diamonds, champagne, and false laughter. Marin stood in the corner of the ballroom, wearing a simple black dress that felt like a costume. Serena had insisted she attend, claiming it was part of her orientation with the foundation. In reality, it was a display of ownership, a visual reminder of who held the leash. Waiters circulated with silver trays, but Marin couldn't stomach the thought of food. She felt the eyes of the elite on her, judging her cheap shoes and her nervous demeanor. She was a sheep in a den of wolves, waiting for the slaughter to begin. Serena glided through the crowd, her arm linked with a prominent senator. She spotted Marin in the corner and detached herself, moving with lethal grace. "You look lovely, Marin." "So unassuming," Serena said, handing her a glass of champagne. "I don't belong here," Marin replied, her voice low. "Of course you don't," Serena agreed pleasantly. "That's what makes you useful." She took a sip of her drink, her eyes scanning the room over the rim of the glass. "I need you to deliver a message to one of the dock workers tonight. Marin stiffened. At the terminal? The clinic is closed. Not at the clinic. At the warehouse district, slip 4. Serena's voice dropped, becoming silken and dangerous. A car will be there at midnight. Give the driver this envelope. Do not look inside. Do not ask questions. She pressed a thick, cream-colored envelope into Marin's hand. It felt heavy, like a weapon. This is part of Julian's treatment, Marin. The knife twisted deeper, the charity poisoned by the ulterior motive. Marin gripped the envelope, her knuckles white. Who am I meeting? No one. You drop it, you leave. Simple. Serena patted her arm and turned back to the crowd, leaving Marin trembling in her wake. Declan watched the party from the service entrance, wearing a waiter's jacket he had borrowed. He wasn't invited, but he needed to see who was pulling the strings from the inside. He spotted Serena immediately, the center of gravity in the room. And then he saw Marin, looking like a frightened deer in headlights. His chest tightened. What was she doing here? She looked trapped, her posture rigid, her eyes wide with distress. He took a step forward, intending to go to her, but stopped himself. If he intervened now, he would blow his cover and risk whatever safety he had left. He watched as Serena spoke to Marin, the transaction invisible but palpable. The way Marin clutched the envelope told him everything he needed to know. She was being used. Serena was using her desperation as a tool. Declan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He knew this game. He had played it in the shadows for years, watching men like Serena destroy people like Marin. He wanted to rush in and grab her, take her away from this toxic atmosphere. But he knew that saving her meant destroying the operation, and he wasn't ready yet. He needed more proof, more names, more connections. Marin excused herself and slipped out the side door, the cool night-era relief. She clutched the envelope to her chest, her heart pounding like a drum. She hailed a cab, giving the driver the address for the industrial district. The ride was a blur of city lights, her mind racing with the consequences of her actions. She was officially a courier for a criminal enterprise, all for the sake of her brother. The cab dropped her off at the edge of the warehouse zone, the streets dark and deserted. She walked toward slip 4, her heels clicking on the pavement, the sound echoing too loudly. A black sedan was idling in the shadows, its engine purring softly. Marin approached the window, which rolled down to reveal a driver in a cap and sunglasses. "The package?" he asked, his voice gruff. Marin handed over the envelope, her hand shaking slightly. "Tell Ms. Whitlock it's done," she said, trying to sound professional. The driver took it without a word, his eyes scanning the street behind her. "Get in," he said suddenly. Marin stepped back. "No, I was told to drop it and leave." "Change of plans. Ms. Whitlock wants a word." The door opened, and a large man stepped out from the shadows behind the car. Marin's breath hitched, panic rising in her throat. This wasn't part of the deal. She was just a receptionist, not a player. She turned to run, but another figure blocked her path. She was trapped between the car and the darkness, realizing too late the charity was a cage. And in the distance, watching from atop a container stack, a pair of eyes narrowed in fury. The sound of a car door slamming shattered the silence, followed by the screech of tires. Marin stumbled back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The men hesitated, looking toward the noise, a distraction that bought her a split second. She didn't wait to see what had caused it. She turned and sprinted toward the fence. Her purse snagged on a chain-link barrier, tearing the strap, but she kept going. She scrambled through a gap in the wire, scraping her arm, the adrenaline masking the pain. Behind her, she heard shouts, but she didn't look back. She ran until her lungs burned, collapsing behind a dumpster in an alleyway 3 blocks away. Declan lowered the metal pipe he had thrown against the shipping container. He had seen the ambush, the way the driver had tried to force Marin into the car. He couldn't let them take her. She was innocent in this war. He watched them search the area, their flashlights cutting through the dark. He stayed hidden in the shadows, his breathing controlled and shallow. They gave up after 10 minutes, driving away in frustration. Declan waited another 5 minutes before descending the ladder, moving silently. He found the torn strap of her purse hanging on the fence, a ghost of her presence. Marin walked home, bruised and terrified, the envelope delivery a failure. She didn't know what she would tell Serena, but she knew she couldn't go back there. She entered her small apartment, locking the door twice and leaning against it. Julian was asleep on the couch, looking peaceful despite the chaos surrounding him. She sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands, and let the sobs come. She had almost been kidnapped, almost disappeared without a trace. And for what? For a woman who treated her life like a disposable commodity. The next morning, Marin went to work at the clinic, trying to act normal. She sorted the mail, her hands shaking as she opened a stack of returned donations. One envelope, thicker than the others, fell onto her desk with a heavy thud. It was addressed to the Whitlock Foundation but stamped return to sender. The return address was a P.O. box she didn't recognize. Curiosity, mixed with a strange instinct, made her slip it into her pocket instead of the bin. She went to the break room, locked the door, and carefully opened the flap. Inside was not a donation check, but a single sheet of folded paper. It was a letter, handwritten in a frantic scrawl that was barely legible. They are laundering the money through the medical shipments. The manifests are fake. Marin gasped, reading the words over and over again. It was a whistleblower account, a cry for help from someone inside. At the bottom was a signature that was smudged, but the initials D.R. were clear. Declan Rourke? No, it couldn't be. He was a forklift operator. But the timing. The accusation against him. It all started to click. He hadn't stolen anything. He had found the truth they were desperate to hide. She realized then that the theft at the warehouse was a setup to silence him. And she had almost become the next victim of their cleanup crew. She folded the letter and hid it in her shoe, her mind racing. If she gave this to Serena, she might buy back her safety. But if she gave it to Declan, she might be able to stop them. It was a choice between survival and justice, the two things she needed most. And standing at the crossroads, she realized she couldn't have both. Declan sat in the library, using a public computer to access the warehouse network. His credentials had been revoked, but he knew a backdoor in the legacy code. He saw the logs for the night Marin was at the warehouse. The car that had met her was registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. He traced the shell company back to the Whitlock Foundation. His blood ran cold. Serena wasn't just involved, she was the architect. She was using the charity to wash money and smuggle goods. And she had tried to recruit Marin to do the dirty work. He needed to warn Marin, to tell her that she was in mortal danger. He packed his bag, grabbing his notebook and the few tools he had left. He was no longer just a man trying to clear his name. He was a man on a mission to take down a predator. He checked his pocket for the rosary, his anchor in the storm. It was still there, the wood warm against his fingers. He walked out of the library, the city skyline looming like a fortress he had to breach. Marin left the clinic, her heart pounding with the secret she carried. She looked around the terminal, half expecting to see Serena's men waiting for her. Instead, she saw Declan standing by a pillar, looking worn but intense. He locked eyes with her, a silent communication passing between them. He knew. She could see it in his eyes. He walked over to her, his presence a shield against the chaos. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Not here," Marin whispered, glancing at the security cameras. "Then where?" he asked, his gaze never leaving her face. "Somewhere they can't hear us," she replied. "Somewhere safe." The grand hall of the city museum was transformed into a gilded cage for the evening's charity auction. Chandeliers dripped crystals onto the crowd of socialites and business moguls sipping vintage wine. Serena Whitlock stood at the podium, her smile blindingly white, her grip on the microphone possessive. "Tonight isn't just about raising money," she announced, her voice silencing the room. "It's about transparency." Marin stood in the back, wearing a borrowed waitress uniform, her tray of canapés trembling. She had taken the shift hoping to remain invisible, to gather intelligence without being seen. Declan was supposed to be watching the exits, but she hadn't seen him yet. "We have a special item tonight," Serena continued, gesturing to a covered easel on stage. "A donation that represents the very heart of our mission." The sheet was pulled away to reveal a large, framed photograph. It was a picture of Marin, taken from a distance, handing the envelope to the driver at the warehouse. The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the space. Marin froze, the tray slipping from her fingers and crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass was like a gunshot in the silence. "This woman," Serena said, pointing a manicured finger at Marin, "is a thief. She stole donation funds intended for sick children and tried to sell them to the black market." It was a lie, a complete fabrication, but the delivery was masterful. The crowd turned, their eyes burning with judgment and curiosity. Marin felt the heat rise in her cheeks, humiliation washing over her in waves. She looked for an exit, but security guards were already blocking the doors. This was a public execution, a spectacle designed to destroy her credibility permanently. "She works at the terminal, a gateway to our international shipments," Serena spun the tale. "She thought she could exploit our kindness, but we found her out." The narrative was flawless, painting Marin as a parasite preying on the foundation. Marin wanted to scream, to deny it, but her throat was tight with panic. She saw the headline in her mind: "Receptionist steals from charity." Her career was over, her reputation ruined, her life effectively dismantled in seconds. And Julian? If she went to jail, who would protect him? From the shadows of the balcony, Declan watched with a seething rage. He had warned her not to come, but she had insisted on trying to fix things. Now, she was being crucified on the altar of Serena's ambition. He gripped the railing, his knuckles white, his mind racing for a countermove. He had the notebook, but he needed a platform to present it. Rushing the stage would just get him arrested or shot. He had to be smart, he had to be precise. "Marin Ellis, come up to the stage," Serena commanded, her voice dripping with false disappointment. "Face the people you have wronged." The guards moved toward Marin, grabbing her arms roughly. She struggled, but it was useless against their strength. They dragged her up the stairs, forcing her to stand next to Serena. The spotlight was blinding, making it impossible to see the audience. She could only hear their murmurs, a tide of disapproval that threatened to drown her. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Serena asked, holding the mic to Marin's lips. Marin looked at her, at the woman who had promised to help her brother. She saw the evil behind the eyes, the total lack of empathy. "I didn't steal anything," Marin whispered, her voice trembling but audible. "I did what you asked me to do." Serena laughed, a light, musical sound that chilled the blood. A desperate lie from a desperate woman. "Guards, take her away." Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Panic erupted immediately, screams and shouts filling the void. In the confusion, Declan moved, slipping down the stairs with the silence of a ghost. He found Marin in the dark, pulling her away from the disoriented guards. "Come with me," he hissed, gripping her hand firmly. "But Julian," she started. "I'll handle him. Right now, we run." They ducked behind a curtain, the chaos providing the cover they desperately needed. Serena's voice rang out from the stage, shouting orders to restore the power. But it was too late. The prey had slipped the trap, at least for tonight. They ran through the service corridors of the museum, the sound of the party fading behind them. Declan led her to a side exit, pushing open the heavy metal door into the cool night air. Marin leaned against the brick wall, gasping for breath, her legs shaking uncontrollably. "We can't go back," she said, tears streaming down her face. "They will kill me." "They won't touch you," Declan said firmly, his voice an anchor in the storm. "Not anymore." He pulled a small, black notebook from his back pocket and handed it to her. "Take this. It's the only thing that matters now." Marin opened the notebook, her eyes scanning the dense, cramped handwriting. It was filled with dates, shipment numbers, and names she didn't recognize. But interspersed were notes in red ink, linking the data to specific individuals. "Look at page 42, Declan instructed, pointing to a smudged entry. Marin flipped to the page and saw a list of medical supply shipments. Next to each entry was a code that matched the inventory numbers at the clinic. "They aren't supplies," Declan explained. "They are luxury goods. Jewelry, art, tech. M labeled as M for medical to bypass customs." It's the perfect crime, Marin realized, her horror growing. "Using sick people as cover. And your brother is just leverage to keep you quiet," Declan added grimly. He looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm sorry I got you into this." "You didn't," Marin said, clutching the notebook. "I walked in with my eyes open. But now they are open for good. We have to stop her." Declan nodded. "This notebook is the key. It links Serena to the docks, the warehouse, and the bank. We just need someone to listen." They hid in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, a place that asked no questions. Marin sat on the edge of the bed, reading the notebook by the dim light of the lamp. She saw Declan's name in the log, noted as a variable to be eliminated. It chilled her to the bone to see how casually they had decided his fate. He was a brilliant man disguised as a laborer, a genius they had underestimated. She watched him pacing the small room, checking the window every few minutes. He was carrying the weight of this war on his shoulders, a burden he didn't deserve. "Why do you care so much?" Marin asked softly. "You lost your job. You could just walk away." Declan stopped pacing and looked at her, his eyes dark and intense. "Because I know what it's like to be powerless," he said quietly. "My father was a good man. He built the logistics software the company uses. He got pushed out by people like Serena, people who value profit over people. I took the job at the warehouse to watch, to learn how they operate. I never expected to find someone like you in the crossfire." Marin felt a surge of affection for him, a connection forged in fire. He wasn't just a whistleblower, he was a man seeking justice for his family. She stood up and walked over to him, taking his hand in hers. "We finished this together," she said. "For Julian, and for your father." Declan squeezed her hand, a rare smile touching his lips. "Together," he agreed. It was a pact made in the shadows, a promise to fight until the end. Back at the museum, the power had been restored, and Serena was furious. She stood in her office, her expensive dress torn from where she had caught it on a nail. "How did they get out?" She screamed at her head of security. "The fire alarm was tripped, ma'am. The panic created a diversion." "Incompetent fools," she spat, sweeping a vase off the desk. "Find them. And bring me the girl. She has the notebook." She knew Declan was the brains, but Marin was the weakness they could exploit. If they had Marin, Declan would come crawling out of the woodwork. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Activate the cleaning crew. And call the facility. Cut off the brothers' treatment. Now." Marin's phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from the rehab center. "Payment declined. Patient is being discharged." Marin cried out, showing the screen to Declan. "They know," she said, her voice breaking. "They are using him to flush us out." Declan took the phone, his jaw set in a hard line. "They want us to panic," he said. "They want us to make a mistake. We won't give them the satisfaction. We go to the press in the morning." The Times has a reporter interested in corporate fraud. We give her the notebook, and we blow this whole thing open. It was a gamble, a high-stakes bluff against a ruthless opponent. But as Marin looked at Declan, she felt a surge of courage. He had been fighting this fight alone for years. Now, he had her, and she had him. Together, they were an army. She closed the notebook, hiding it under the mattress. "Get some sleep," Declan said, sitting in the chair by the door. "I'll take first watch." Marin lay down, her exhausted body finally succumbing to rest. For the first time in days, she didn't feel alone in the dark. The morning sun broke over the city, casting long shadows across the financial district. Inside the Whitlock Foundation headquarters, a team of external auditors set up shop in the conference room. They were from a top-tier firm, hired by the board amid rumors of impropriety. Serena greeted them with a warm smile, offering coffee and bagels, playing the role of the gracious host. She had nothing to hide, she claimed, welcoming the scrutiny. But behind her confident facade, her mind was racing through the numbers. She had spent the night moving funds, closing shell accounts, and shredding documents. It was a frantic attempt to sanitize the ledger before the auditors could dig too deep. Marin and Declan watched the building from a cafe across the street. "Too risky to go in there," Declan said, sipping his coffee. "Security is tight. We need to get the notebook to the lead auditor, a woman named Sarah Vance." "I can create a distraction," Marin offered. "I can cause a scene at the front desk." "No," Declan said firmly. "They are looking for you. You'll be arrested on sight." "I'll go. I know the building layout from the gala." He pulled his hood up, covering his face, preparing to infiltrate the lion's den. Inside the conference room, Sarah Vance was already finding discrepancies. The charity's medical expenditure reports didn't match the inventory logs from the ports. "We have a mismatch," Sarah announced, pointing to a spreadsheet. "Millions in unaccounted freight." Serena leaned over, her smile fixed. "Just a lag in the system, I'm sure. Our logistics are complex." She signaled to her assistant, who quickly typed a message on her laptop. "Rourke is here. Intercept him." The trap was set, ready to snap shut on the man who knew too much. Declan entered the building through the service entrance, using a stolen keycard. He moved quickly through the corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached the ventilation shaft near the conference room and opened the grate. He could hear the auditors talking, the rustle of papers, the click of pens. He pulled the notebook from his pocket, wrapped in a plastic bag. He just needed to drop it into the room, somewhere they would find it. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see two security guards blocking his path. "Mr. Rourke," one of them said, hand on his taser. "Ms. Whitlock is expecting you." Declan backed up, his hand gripping the edge of the vent shaft. He had a choice: surrender or fight. He looked at the guards, then at the open grate above him. He wasn't going back to jail, and he wasn't going to let Serena win. He lunged, not at the guards, but at the fire alarm switch on the wall. The alarm blared, a deafening wail that echoed through the building. The guards flinched, surprised by his sudden aggression. Declan used the moment to scramble up the wall, kicking the grate open. He tossed the bagged notebook into the ventilation duct just as the guards tackled him. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of him. Rough hands grabbed his arms, pinning him face down on the carpet. "Got him," the guard said into his radio. In the conference room, the alarm caused chaos. Sarah Vance stood up, looking around in confusion. A plastic bag fell from the ceiling vent, landing squarely on the conference table. It slid across the polished wood, coming to a rest against her coffee cup. The room fell silent, the alarm blaring in the background. Sarah picked up the bag, her eyes widening as she saw the notebook inside. She opened it, scanning the first page, then the next. Her expression shifted from annoyance to shock, then to grim determination. Seal the room, she commanded the auditors. No one leaves. Serena watched from the doorway, her face pale. She saw the bag, she saw the look on Sarah's face. She knew it was over. The notebook was in the hands of the authorities. Her empire was crumbling around her, brick by brick. But she wasn't defeated yet. She still had cards to play. She pulled out her phone and dialed the police. "I have an intruder in the building," she said, her voice trembling with feigned fear. "And he's attacked my staff." Declan was hauled to his feet, his hands cuffed behind his back. He looked up at the vent, praying the notebook had been found. He caught a glimpse of Serena watching him, a look of pure hatred in her eyes. He smiled grimly. He had played his part. Now it was up to the system to do the rest. As they dragged him away, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had done what he set out to do. He had exposed the truth. The news of the intruder at the Whitlock Foundation spread like wildfire. Marin watched the report on the TV in the clinic break room, her hand over her mouth. They had Declan. He had been caught trying to expose the fraud. Her heart ached for him, sitting alone in a cell while the world moved on. She knew she had to act, to finish what he had started. But as she walked out onto the clinic floor, she found the manager waiting for her. "Marin, my office," he said, not meeting her eyes. She followed him in, confusion warring with dread. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken accusations. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair. She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We've received a call from corporate," he began, shuffling papers on his desk. "Effective immediately, you are being reassigned." "Reassigned?" Marin asked, her voice rising. "To where?" "To the night shift at the supply depot," he replied, avoiding her gaze. "It's a demotion, Marin. You'll be sorting inventory." Marin stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. I'm a medical receptionist." "It's out of my hands," he said, looking tired. "There are allegations against you. Regarding the theft at the gala. They say you're a security risk." Marin stood up, slamming her hands on the desk. "This is retaliation. Serena Whitlock is doing this." "Watch your tone," the manager warned. "Unless you want to be fired entirely. Take the shift or walk away. Those are your only options." Marin sank back into the chair, defeated. She couldn't lose her job. She needed the insurance, meager as it was, for Julian. "Fine," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I'll take the shift." "Good. Go home. Your shift starts at midnight." Marin walked out of the office, her head held high despite the humiliation. Whispers followed her down the hallway, her colleagues judging her without knowing the truth. She went to the hospital to see Julian, needing to see his face to ground herself. But when she arrived, his room was empty. The bed was stripped, the locker cleared out. Panic seized her. She ran to the nurse's station. "Where is Julian Ellis?" she demanded. "He was discharged this morning," the nurse replied coldly. "Discharged? To where?" "Against medical advice. He left with a woman. Said she was his sister." Marin froze. "A woman? Not her. Serena." She had Julian. She had taken him to ensure Marin's compliance. It was a checkmate move, stripping away Marin's allies one by one. First Declan, then her job, now her brother. She was alone, cornered, and terrified. She walked out of the hospital, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her like a cage. She had no one left to fight for, and no one to fight with. Declan sat in the holding cell, staring at the concrete wall. He had no way of knowing what was happening to Marin. He only knew that he had failed to protect her. The notebook was with the auditors, but the legal process was slow. Serena would use that time to destroy anyone who opposed her. He leaned his head back against the wall, closing his eyes. He thought about the rosary in his pocket, the only thing they hadn't taken from him. He prayed for a miracle, for a way to turn the tide. Meanwhile, Serena sat in her office, a glass of scotch in her hand. She felt invincible. The auditors were stalling, the police were investigating Declan for terrorism. And Marin was broken, isolated at the depot. Julian was in a private facility, heavily sedated and under guard. Everything was falling into place. She took a sip of her drink, savoring the burn. She had won. The little people had tried to revolt, and she had crushed them. The city was hers, the money was hers, and the power was absolute. Or so she thought. The supply depot was a cold, cavernous space filled with shelves that reached the ceiling. Marin pushed a heavy cart, her back aching, her eyes blurred with fatigue. She had been working for hours, sorting boxes of medical supplies she wasn't allowed to inspect. It was menial work, designed to break her spirit. Suddenly, the lights flickered and brightened, illuminating a section of the floor. A group of people in suits walked in, led by Serena Whitlock. "Here she is," Serena announced, her voice echoing in the vast space. "Our devoted employee, working tirelessly to make amends." Marin stopped pushing the cart, wiping her hands on her uniform. Serena walked up to her, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Marin, we have some donors here today. They want to hear from you." "Hear what?" Marin asked, her voice raspy from the dust. "Your apology," Serena said, her eyes hard. "For stealing from the foundation. For betraying the trust of these good people." Marin looked around at the donors, men and women with bored expressions. They saw her as a thief, a villain caught in the act. "I didn't steal anything," Marin said, her voice trembling. Serena sighed, shaking her head in disappointment. Still in denial. "It's tragic, really." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Marin could hear. "Apologize, or Julian stays in that hole forever. Do it now. Say the words 'I am sorry for what I did.'" The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Marin looked at Serena, seeing the monster behind the mask. She looked at the donors, seeing their indifference, their privilege. She looked at the floor, seeing the scuff marks on the concrete. She was trapped. If she spoke the truth, they wouldn't believe her. If she stayed silent, Julian suffered. She had no choice but to play the part, to demean herself for his sake. Marin started, her voice cracking. She took a deep breath, forcing the words out. "I am sorry." "Sorry for what?" Serena prompted. "Sorry for taking the money," Marin choked out. "For betraying the charity." She felt like she was dying inside, piece by piece. Her integrity, the one thing she had left, was gone. She hung her head, unable to look at anyone. "Thank you, Marin," Serena said loudly, turning to the donors. "You see. Justice is served. She is paying her debt to society." The donors nodded politely, some clapping half-heartedly. Serena basked in their approval, her ego inflating with every second. She had broken the girl in front of them, proving her dominance. It was the ultimate power trip. But as the clapping died down, a voice rang out from the back of the depot. "I wouldn't clap too hard if I were you." Everyone turned to see a woman in a trench coat standing by the loading dock doors. It was Sarah Vance, the lead auditor. She walked forward, holding the black notebook in her hand. "Ms. Ellis has nothing to apologize for," Sarah said, her voice steel. "In fact, she and Mr. Rourke are the only heroes in this room." Serena's smile froze. "Ms. Vance, this is a private tour." "Not anymore," Sarah replied. "I've finished the preliminary audit. And the numbers don't just not add up. They scream fraud. She held up the notebook. This confirms it. Every diverted shipment, every fake ledger. It's all here, linking directly to your accounts, Ms. Whitlock. The donors began to murmur, their indifference shifting to concern. Serena's face flushed red, her composure slipping. This is ridiculous, she spat. That notebook is a fabrication. Written by a disgruntled employee. Written by a genius, Sarah countered. And verified by the bank transfers. You're under investigation, Serena. And this time, there's nowhere to hide. Marin looked up, hope reigniting in her chest. Sarah was here. She had the proof. Serena was cornered. But even as relief washed over her, Marin knew it wasn't over. Serena was a predator, and a predator was most dangerous when wounded. She watched Serena's eyes, seeing the calculation, the desperation. The game wasn't finished yet. And the next move would be brutal. The chaos in the depot gave Marin the split second she needed to slip away. While Sarah confronted Serena and the donors demanded answers, Marin ran. She didn't know where she was going, just that she had to get out. She found herself in a sterile supply room, locking the door behind her. She leaned against it, breathing hard, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed a moment to think, to process the sudden turn of events. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. They are moving Julian to the secure wing of the hospital. I can get him out. Meet me at the back dock in 5 minutes. Marin stared at the screen. Was it a trap? Or was it Declan? Maybe he had been released. She couldn't take the chance. She had to save Julian. She peeked out the door, saw the corridor was clear, and ran. She reached the back dock, the cool night air hitting her face. A figure stood in the shadows, waving her over. Marin approached cautiously, relief washing over her when she saw who it was. It was one of the orderlies from the rehab center, a man named Tom. I have a car, he whispered. Julian is inside. He's sedated but stable. Thank you, Marin breathed. Thank you so much. They moved toward the van, but just as they reached for the door, a car screeched around the corner. It was Serena. She stepped out, flanked by 2 large men. Did you really think it would be that easy? Serena asked, her voice cold. Marin stepped back, shielding Tom. Leave him out of this. This is between you and me. Oh, it's far beyond that now, Serena said, pulling a gun from her purse. Marin gasped, freezing in terror. Serena didn't look like a corporate chairperson anymore. She looked like a killer. Get in the car, Marin. Now. What about Julian? Marin asked, her voice shaking. He's safe for now. But his safety depends entirely on your cooperation. Serena gestured to the warehouse. We are going to destroy that notebook. And you are going to help me. Marin looked at Tom, who was trembling with fear. Go, she told him. Get Julian and run. Tom didn't hesitate. He jumped in the van and sped away. Marin turned to face Serena, her fear replaced by a cold resolve. She was doing this for Julian. She was doing it for Declan. She walked toward Serena's car, her hands raised. That's a good girl, Serena purred. Marin got into the back seat, the door locking behind her. As they drove away, she watched the depot disappear into the distance. She had betrayed herself, surrendered to the enemy. But in doing so, she had bought her brother's freedom. It was a trade she would have to live with, if she lived at all. Serena sat in the front seat, looking at Marin in the rearview mirror. You chose wisely, she said. Family is important. But don't think this makes us even. You still have a debt to pay. Marin looked out the window, tears streaming down her face. She thought of Declan, sitting in a cell, wondering where she was. She prayed he would forgive her. She prayed he would understand. She had made the ultimate sacrifice, giving herself up to save the people she loved. And as the city lights blurred past, she whispered a silent goodbye to the life she had known. The interrogation room at the police station was gray and windowless. Declan sat at the metal table, his hands cuffed, waiting for the lawyer Sarah had sent. The door opened, and a woman in a sharp suit walked in. "I'm Elena Rodriguez," she said, opening her file. "Ms. Vance hired me. She says you're the key to taking down Whitlock. They're holding you on a B charge, but we can get that dropped. If you help us locate the original digital files." "The files are on a server in the warehouse basement," Declan said immediately. "But they're encrypted. I need access to a terminal to unlock them." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You can do that from here?" "Not remotely. The system is air-gapped. I have to be there." "Impossible. You're a suspect." "Then get me a warrant," Declan said, his voice intense. "Because the notebook is just a copy. The server has the raw data. Every transaction, every name, every bribe. It's the smoking gun." Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I'll see what I can do. But you need to know, Ms. Ellis is missing." Declan's heart stopped. "Missing?" "She was seen leaving with Whitlock. We think she's been taken." Declan gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. This was no longer just about justice. It was about rescue. He had to get to that server, and he had to get to Marin. An hour later, Elena returned with a police escort. "You've got 1 hour," she said. "And don't touch anything else." Declan was driven to the warehouse, the sirens wailing in the night. They burst through the doors, the night shift workers scattering. Declan ran to the basement, his memory guiding him through the maze of cables. He found the terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The code flowed from him, a language he spoke better than English. He bypassed the firewalls, navigating the labyrinthine security protocols. He found the hidden partition, the digital vault where Serena hid her secrets. He plugged in a drive, beginning the download. "Hurry up," the officer behind him urged. "It's a lot of data," Declan gritted out. The progress bar crawled forward, agonizingly slow. 90. 95. 99. Complete. He yanked the drive out and turned to leave. But standing in the doorway was Serena's head of security. "Going somewhere?" the man asked, drawing a weapon. The police officer stepped forward, gun drawn. "Drop it." The man hesitated, then dropped his gun, raising his hands. "Game over." Declan walked past him, the drive burning a hole in his pocket. He had the evidence. Now he needed to find Marin. Meanwhile, Marin was being held in a warehouse across town. Serena sat on a crate, watching her. "You should have stayed away, Marin. You could have lived a simple life. Instead, you poked your nose where it didn't belong." Marin looked at her, tired and broken. "Just kill me and get it over with." "Oh, I'm not going to kill you," Serena said, smiling. "That would be too easy. I'm going to frame you for the whole thing. Your fingerprints are on the notebook. Your confession is on tape. You're going to take the fall for everything." Marin closed her eyes, accepting her fate. She had saved Julian. That was enough. But suddenly, the warehouse doors exploded inward. SWAT teams flooded the room, shouting commands. "Get on the ground. Hands in the air." Serena stood up, shock registering on her face. "This is illegal." She screamed. "I am the victim here." "Not anymore," a voice said from the doorway. It was Declan. He walked in, flanked by Elena and Sarah. He looked at Marin, relief washing over his face. "It's over," he said. "We have everything." The emergency shareholder meeting was called for the following morning. The grand ballroom was packed to capacity, every seat filled with angry investors. The mood was ugly, the buzz of conversation a low roar of hostility. At the front of the room, the board of directors sat in stunned silence. On the screen behind them, the data Declan had retrieved was scrolling. Bank accounts, shell companies, bribes, and fake charities. It was a masterpiece of criminality, laid bare for the world to see. Marin stood at the back of the room, flanked by police. She was free, but the trauma of the night before still lingered. Declan stood next to her, holding her hand. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "But I want to see it." She wanted to see the woman who had tormented her finally fall. Serena was led into the room in handcuffs, her designer dress disheveled. The crowd gasped as she was marched to the podium. Not to speak, but to watch. Sarah Vance took the microphone, her face grim. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the audit is complete. Ms. Whitlock has been arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and kidnapping. The board is cooperating fully with the investigation." The room erupted in shouts and questions. "Where is our money?" One investor yelled. "Is the company bankrupt?" Another shouted. Sarah held up her hand for silence. "The foundation is insolvent. But the assets are being frozen and liquidated to repay the debts. However, due to the scale of the fraud, losses are inevitable." Serena stood rigidly, her eyes darting around the room. She saw the hate in their eyes, the betrayal. She had been their queen, their golden goose. Now she was pariah. She looked for a friendly face, a supporter, but found none. Even the board members looked away, distancing themselves from her. She was alone, just as she had made Marin feel. Declan squeezed Marin's hand. "Watch this." He walked down the aisle toward the podium. The crowd parted, recognizing him from the news reports. The hero who had brought down the empire. He stopped in front of Serena, looking her in the eye. "You forgot one thing," he said quietly. "You underestimated the people you stepped on. And now, they are stepping on you." He turned to the microphone, his voice clear and strong. "My name is Declan Rourke. I was the forklift operator you fired. But am also the architect of the logistics system you exploited. This company was built on my father's code, and am taking it back. The board has agreed to my terms. I am the new CEO." The room went silent. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the crowd. It wasn't just for him, it was for justice. Serena slumped, the fight finally draining out of her. She was led away, disappearing through the side doors. The humiliation was total, her reputation in tatters. Marin watched her go, feeling a surge of vindication. It was done. The monster was caged. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with tension. It was the final hearing for the case, the sentencing phase. Serena sat at the defendant's table, looking pale and drawn. Her lawyer was arguing for leniency, citing her philanthropy. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge looked unimpressed. Then, it was time for the victim impact statements. Marin stood up, smoothing her skirt. She walked to the stand, her eyes on Serena. "She didn't just steal money," Marin said, her voice steady. "She stole my dignity, my security, and almost my life. She used my brother's illness as a weapon. She held his life over my head to force me to commit crimes. I don't just want justice. I want her to feel the fear she instilled in me." Serena's lawyer stood up. "Objection. This is hearsay and emotion." The judge overruled him. "Let her speak." Marin continued, pouring out her heart, recounting the terror of the warehouse, the humiliation at the depot. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the court clerk was wiping a tear from her eye. Then it was Declan's turn. He stood tall, his presence commanding. She destroyed my father's legacy, Declan said. She used his life's work to fund her greed. But she also taught me a lesson. She taught me that power without morality is poison. I ask that the court show no mercy. Because she certainly showed none to us. The trial was winding down. It seemed like a victory. But then, Serena's lawyer called a surprise witness. It was Tom, the orderly who had helped Marin. He walked to the stand, looking nervous. Did you help Ms. Ellis kidnap her brother from the facility? The lawyer asked. Yes, Tom admitted. But she was forced to. Did she sign a confession admitting to the theft of the donation funds? Yes, but Serena made her. So she admitted to a felony. And she conspired to interfere with a patient custody. It sounds like Ms. Ellis is just as much a criminal as my client. Marin stood up, panic rising. That's not true. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Serena smiled, a twisted, vindictive expression. She had one last card to play. If you grant me leniency, Serena's lawyer said, my client will testify that Ms. Ellis acted alone in the kidnapping. And that she was the mastermind behind the theft. Or, you can throw the book at me, and I take Ms. Ellis down with me. It was an ultimatum. A Sophie's choice. Save Serena and go free, or condemn Serena and risk going to jail herself. The judge looked at Marin. Ms. Ellis, do you wish to respond? Marin looked at Declan. He was shaking his head slightly. Don't do it, his eyes said. Don't make a deal with the devil. But Marin thought about Julian. She couldn't go to jail. She had to take care of him. She took a deep breath, her heart breaking. She started, but Declan interrupted her. Your Honor, he said, standing up. I have new evidence. He held up a USB drive. Recordings from Serena's office. Proving she coerced Ms. Ellis. And proving that the confession was scripted. He had downloaded them from the server along with the financials. It was the checkmate. Serena's face fell. Her bluff had been called. The judge took the drive. I will review this. But given this development, I see no reason for a deal. Ms. Whitlock, you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. And Ms. Ellis, you are free to go. Marin slumped back in her seat, tears of relief streaming down her face. Declan had saved her again. He had anticipated her betrayal and stopped it before she could speak. He had protected her, even when she was willing to sacrifice herself. It was the ultimate act of love. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind of media frenzy and legal depositions. Serena was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, her empire dismantled. The Whitlock Foundation was dissolved, the assets distributed to the charities she had cheated. Marin and Julian were reunited, his recovery back on track with legitimate funding. But amidst the celebration, there was one question everyone was asking. Who was Declan Rourke really? The press had dubbed him the Robin Hood of the warehouse. But the truth was far more complex. Marin met him for coffee at a small cafe near the courthouse. He looked different in a suit, more polished, but his eyes were the same. You've been avoiding the press, Marin noted. I don't like the spotlight, Declan replied. I prefer the shadows. But you're the CEO now, she said. You can't hide forever. About that, Declan said, leaning forward. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, worn photograph. It showed a man standing next to a prototype of a logistics robot. That's my father, Declan said softly. Declan Rourke Sr. He founded this company 40 years ago. He wrote the code. Marin looked at the photo, then at Declan. But your name? You worked as a forklift operator. After my father died, the board voted me out. I was too young. They hired Serena to run things, and she slowly pushed me out. I didn't have the money to fight them legally. So I disappeared. I took a job in my own warehouse, watching, learning. I waited for the perfect moment to take back what was mine. Marin stared at him, stunned. You aren't just a whistleblower. You're the rightful owner. In the air, Declan corrected. But I don't feel like one. I feel like the guy who fell in love with the girl at the terminal. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken emotion. He had been a billionaire in disguise, living like a pauper to protect his legacy. And he had chosen her over his secrecy. Why didn't you tell me? Marin asked. Because I needed you to see me, Declan said simply. Not the name, not the money. Just me. And I needed to know if you would stand by me when I had nothing. Marin reached across the table and took his hand. You never had nothing, Declan. You had integrity. And that's worth more than all the money in the world. Declan smiled, a genuine, warm smile. Now that I have the company back, things are going to change. No more fraud. No more exploitation. I want to build something my father would be proud of. And I want you to help me. Marin squeezed his hand. I think I'd like that. But first, you have to buy me a real dinner. No warehouse cafeterias. Deal. The city skyline glowed against the night sky as Declan stood on the balcony of his new office. It was the same office Serena had used, but it looked different now. The cold, predatory decor was gone, replaced by warm wood and family photos. He looked down at the street, watching the traffic flow, thinking about the journey he had taken. He had gone from a forklift operator to a CEO, from a pariah to a prodigal son. But the most important change wasn't his title or his bank account. It was the woman standing next to him. Marin leaned against the railing, the wind blowing through her hair. Julian was 6 months sober, working a job at the community center. He was safe, healthy, and finally free of the debt that had haunted them. Marin had taken a position as the head of the new company's ethics division. It was a role created just for her, a way to ensure the past never repeated itself. Are you happy? Declan asked, breaking the silence. Marin turned to him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. I'm at peace, she said. Happiness is a big word. But peace. I have that. I never thought I'd be here. I thought I'd die in that warehouse. Declan put his arm around her, pulling her close. We survived, he said. That's enough. It's more than enough, Marin agreed. She thought about the cost of their survival. The trauma, the fear, the loss of innocence. They had both been scarred by the battle. The romance between them wasn't a fairy tale, it was a bond forged in fire. It was stronger than love, it was survival. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't met? Marin asked. Declan shook his head. I don't like to think about that. If I hadn't met you, I'd still be in the shadows, alone. You gave me a reason to come into the light. Marin rested her head on his shoulder. And you gave me the strength to fight. They stood there for a long time, watching the world turn below them. The rich versus poor divide that had defined their lives was gone. Or rather, they had built a bridge across it. They had taken on the system and won, not by becoming like the enemy, but by holding on to their humanity. It was a bittersweet victory, a love that had saved them both but had cost them dearly. And as the night deepened, they held on to each other, grateful for the second chance they had been given. The story wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that was worth everything. The dust has settled on the empire Serena Whitlock built, leaving behind a legacy of greed exposed by the quiet brilliance of a man she underestimated. Declan Rourke stepped out of the shadows not just as a victor, but as a guardian of the integrity his father cherished, proving that true power lies in character, not bank accounts. Marin Ellis found her strength in the darkest of places, fighting for her brother and ultimately for the truth, emerging not unscarred, but unbroken. Their romance was forged in the fires of corporate warfare, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit against overwhelming odds. Justice was served, the corrupt were dethroned, and while the emotional toll was high, the bond they formed became the foundation of a new era for the company and their lives. This is more than just a story of rich versus poor. It is a reminder that even in the deepest valleys, there is always a way back to the light. If you believe in second chances and the power of truth, make sure to subscribe and join this community. Like this story if it resonated with you, share it to spread the message, and comment below on who you think was the real hero. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the drama, the romance, and the revenge. We have so much more in store for you.